All right, we're live. How you guys feeling? I'm feeling great tonight.
I'm a little bit on the toasty side.
It's hot out.
It's only 104 today.
Wow. I'm in Michigan, so it's nice and chill here. I'm excited about tonight's episode, guys.
Yeah, we got some cool stuff.
This is a sexy book I'm going to get to talk about right here.
Yeah, I saw this one. I went, ooh.
Man, it's an O'Brien book, which we're going to get into. We are going to get into. And speaking of sexy, I want to dedicate tonight's show to the sexy people. How you guys feel about that?
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
If you're tuning in and you're a MILF, a DILF, and especially if you're a GILF, this episode is dedicated to you. This is a special episode just for you.
No fat bottom girls in this episode?
I mean, no, don't get me wrong. If that's your thing, then that's sexy for you. That's what's great about dedicating to the sexy people, because anybody can be sexy. You know?
You are correct.
How are you guys doing? How was your week, Phil?
Very busy. Very busy. And ended on a few high notes though. So going into this week, stronger than before.
That's what I love to hear. Onward and upward. Excelsior. How about you, Captain Larry? How you doing, my man? You fully recovered from COVID?
I'm fully recovered from COVID. I still have chosen to stay home from work. So if anybody from work's watching, sorry, I'm not coming back. I have been busy trying to get this done.
Ooh.
And it's finally done.
Book.
It is fully leaf cast. I got whole new corners on here, and all the wraps are done. Done! Yay!
Wow!
Congratulations!
It's been a real nightmare, because every time I try to leaf cast some of the stuff, it was so tight that the cast wouldn't take. Mm-hmm. So, but I worked my way through it. But I got it now.
A learning experience.
That's crazy. Is. I've made this analogy a few times on my channel. Not on this show yet, but I'm about to. There's like a couple of people that have hit a grand slam in their first at bat in the major leagues. It's actually happened. Like you can look that up statistically.
That's true.
Right?
I believe it.
And I mentioned on my channel once before, because if you go back and look at Jim Starlin's body of work, my argument is like his first work in the majors was a freaking grand slam. His first work in the majors was the first appearance of Thanos, for freak's sake, right?
Oh yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
Jim Starlin, unreal, right? And right now I'm like feeling like this work on the Batman is Jim Starlin-esque. I feel like this is your first full leaf casted book.
It is.
And it's just out of the park. I think the work you did on that, because I've been seeing folks on the channel don't know, I've been seeing a little bit of behind the scenes. There's actually been, and the reason I have this screen up right now is Captain Larry shared a lot of what's going on in our comic book conservation community. And so that's my segue into this. And he's really hit the work. Hold it up again, Larry.
Let me hold
He's
really did a great
He's
job
really
on
hit
this.
it out of the park. But if you want to see the behind the scenes, come join us in the comic book conservation community Facebook group. And it's just super supportive, collaborative environment for everyone who doesn't quite get enough comic book conservation in this show, who wants more. Come join us there, and you're gonna have a fun time. And actually, I'm gonna highlight you, Captain Larry, and let you let you show that. Well, that's the only way I know how to do it. But go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Let me show that book off.
So let me hold this up to the camera. Now, this book, let me see if I get it focused on the book and not me. This is a rodent chew. up here. This entire corner was gone. There are wormholes throughout this book. You can see the one right. I'm trying to do this backwards.
Right there, yeah.
Right there. Wormhole there. And there's wormhole right up here at the top, right there.
Yep.
It went,
People who don't know, from literal bookworms. The term where we call people, hey, you're a bookworm.
So I'm going to hold
bookworm. That's an actual kind of a larval insect.
Get this
who
to
eats
focus
paper.
Here. So you can see right here, this is that corner. It was completely gone, literally. So if I can tilt this a little bit, you can see the wraps.
The whole book looks so solid. Like, and you can just tell by the raking light and the way you're handling it and the way that it looks. It looks so good. Oh, nice.
My buddy Mike says Mr. Mind strikes again. I'm not sure Mr. Mind is an actual bookworm.
Everything's nice and flat, and it's good. It never had anything else. It's an 80-year-old book. It's from 1940.
It's awesome.
It's insane.
So
congratulations.
It's going out in the mail tomorrow.
This is awesome.
So we'll see what it looks like when it comes back. Probably, maybe end of the month we might have something to talk about.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
And all the sexy people appreciate that. So I'm going to do shout outs. We got Hugo Danner, my buddy Mike. We got Ben Stewart. Shelby from Shelby's Comics is here. Don Carter. And like I said, all the sexy people that are watching, welcome. So we have a show in two main parts today. We're going to do an aside, and we're always welcome to interact. You're welcome to put your comments or questions up here. It's a live show for a reason, so we can interact. So
because we
may go off on any kind of side tangent. I do have an alcoholic beverage, so there's no telling what'll happen. And I'm going to kick us off like we normally do with fair market value.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I am so thrilled about the book that we're talking about today for the fair market value segment, because it's one that I have been staring at the cover of since I was 10 years old. Wonder Comics #1. And I'm going to get into why I've been staring at this cover since I was 10 years old, which is over 40 years ago, in a little bit. But the reason why we do the fair market value segment is because the show is about comic book conservation. Welcome, Maurice. And one of the, conservation is labor intensive. It can be expensive. And when we engage in this, sure, a lot of it is a labor of love. A lot of it is to just preserve the books that we enjoy and that we treasure. But you also want to make sure that in that preservation, you're actually creating some equity, and there's at least some kind of exchange for your valuable time, because that's the asset that, is most precious to us. So that's why we do the fair market value segment, and that's why we open with it. So this copy of Wonder Comics #1, the conserved 1.0, sold at auction in the last week. And this is an exceedingly rare, very, very cool book.
Yeah, there's not many on the census.
Oh, man, we're going to get into it. But this is a Will Eisner cover. For those of you that don't know, Will Eisner, it's kind of like the Academy Awards or the award for your industry. In comic books, they're the Eisners. They're literally named after. This is like the Mr. Olympia has the Sandow, is awarded to Mr. Olympia because it's named after Eugene Sandow, the first and greatest bodybuilder. The Eisner Awards are named after Eisner because he's kind of the first and best comic book artist / writer, creator, ever. So this is an Eisner cover. Eisner works on the interior. I just can't be more excited to talk about this. So let's just jump right into it. Again, this book sold at auction this past week. Wonder Comics is a Fox publication. There's only 2 issues. You're looking at it. If you want to be a completionist, you've only got to get these 2 issues. Issue #1 that we're going to talk about today is the first appearance of Wonder Man. It's 1939, obviously. He's a very obvious Superman knockoff. Yeah. And it's his first and only appearance. Median grade on this book is exactly mathematically 2/2.5. Insane. 15 universal copies, people.
Yeah.
What?
Wow, there's 9.4 universal out there.
Oh, yeah. I always look at that, and there's actually two of them. I always wonder, like, is that the Mile High copy? It almost has to be.
It usually is. Yeah.
Right? The Mile High collection was so insane, people.
Wow. And extensive too. Yeah.
And some of them are still not slabbed, actually. Some of the Mile High copies are still not slabbed. So I don't know, and I did not look up to see what the highest ever this sold for. But again, it's insane. 7 restored, 1 qualified, 2 conserved, of which 1 sold this past week, the 1.0. There's also a 3.5 conserved out there. This book was featured in O'Brien, and for those of you that don't know, I think if you're a fan of Golden Age books, or even if you just wonder about Golden Age books, do yourself a favor, go out and get a copy of this book. This book, titled The Golden Age of Comic Books, was published in 1977 by Richard O'Brien. Interestingly, Richard O'Brien's uncle was a comic book creator during the end of the Golden Age. So that's maybe part of his connection and why he became fascinated. This is one of, or maybe it's the first book to feature full color reprints of Golden Age comic book covers. And I came into a beat up copy of this book sometime around 1982, 83. And I was fascinated with it. This is my gateway into Golden Age comic books. And I am currently on the hunt for any comic book that was featured in this book. In the same way that Larry is hunting Sodi, Seduction of the Innocent covers.
The Sodi stuff.
I'm hunting O'Brien covers. And
very cool.
This Wonder Comics #1 is one of them. There's some incredible. I think O'Brien was a big fan of Lou Fine, a big fan of Eisner, a big fan of the Fox Syndicate's books because they're a bit overrepresented in this book. But they're so difficult. These books they're just rare as hen's teeth. They're so low census counts, and Shelby just got himself a copy. Yeah, this book is inexpensive. If you have even a passing interest in the Golden Age, go out and get a copy of this book. You will love it. You will love this book. Cool. And it does reprint. This predates Gerber's treatment of the Golden Age, the photojournal of comic books, and it reproduces the covers. Obviously, it has a much smaller selection of covers than Ernst Gerber's work. But it reproduces the covers, I believe, greater than 1-to-1, because this is a slightly larger format than a Golden Age book, and the art spans the entire page, and it's on glossy. It's really beautiful. Actually, Phil and I were discussing it, and knowing what I know now, I'm looking at some of the covers, and I'm going, "Oh, this is restored. This one was color touched," and it's just something that you should have a copy of. Like I said, if at all you're interested in
just another
in Golden Age comics. Yeah, and it's very early in terms of discussing. The term "the Golden Age." I don't even know if it was 10 years old when this book was published. Right, so it's a very early book on the subject. All in color for a dime predates it by about 5 years. But that book doesn't have any color reproductions, if I recall correctly. It's just a different treatment. So check it out. So that's the reason why I was so interested in our book today, because I've been staring at this cover since I was 10 years old and just thinking like, man, what an incredible time the Golden Age was. So Wonder Comics #1, here's the last 1.0 that sold, and it presents pretty darn well for a 1.0. It does have tape on the spine and some issues, but overall, I've seen worse 1.0s. Frankly, I think I've seen worse 2.0s.
What's the note say? I can't.
I'm about to show you.
That's what I wanted.
It is brittle. Yeah, brittle pages. Spine of cover completely split and reattached with tape. So I think 1.0 is correct. It just happens to be one that presents well. Tape on interior, cover, and interior. I just want to go through the art comments. Will Eisner, Seeger, Bob Kane, stories and art internal. Will Eisner cover, only appearance of Wonder Man. Greater notes include heavy staining to cover, light pieces out to cover, moderate tears to cover, moderate wear all corners of cover, moderate wear all edges of cover, reattached with tape cover, split cover, tape interior cover. Look, it's been well loved, but I still maintain this presents very well for 1.0. Right, but it does have brittle pages. So, but look, 15 universal in the census. What are you going to do if you're trying to collect all the covers featured in O'Brien? What are you going to do? You pass one up, you may never see another one up for sale, right? So, this one sold January 2021, $6,600 for a 1.0, guys.
That's cool.
Comment?
I did look up the 9.4. It wasn't recent. It was, I think, 2017, $68,000.
Wow.
So,
was that well bought?
I think
so.
I think it was well bought. There was another one.
If a 1.0 goes for 6,600.
Well, a year later, a 9.4 sold around 32,000. So it might be the same one. I don't know. There's only two of them.
Yeah,
it's tough once you get up above like 10 and then 20K.
Well, how many buyers are there for a $50,000+ comic?
Exactly.
Right?
You get into a different type of clientele at that point.
Two things I wanted to say. One, as time goes on, I would argue, as much as I hate seeing brittle pages, one thing I hate seeing more than brittle pages is seeing a book like this with the reds and it's all faded and the reds look, so there's nothing you'll ever really be able to do about that, but you can at least watch the pages and so that's an interesting thing as time goes on, what defects will actually become perceived as kind of worse. The other thing too is the May 1939.
Well, looking at this book,
just to fill out your comment, Phil. Sorry to interrupt, Larry, but I just want to fill this out. I think what you're suggesting is we can lessen the embrittlement here with a conservation.
Yeah,
it perhaps should be done.
There's
I would say so, probably. For this book, yeah. But also, it's interesting how the collectors of this book too, because there is also that one added fact of while this is the 2-issue run, it does continue with Wonder World, and then some of the completists. That might be going after this one and the other one. Then you got competition. So then some of those people only like these books in universal labels for now. So maybe the next new guard of people that get some of these books, and some of the current collectors would look at a book like this and say, let's conserve it.
There's also still in the golden age, Neater Publications or Netter Publications also has a Wonder Comics title. So, sorry, Larry, what did you want to say that I interrupted?
Oh no, I think we just covered. I was just going to say I'm looking at this book and the staining and the tape, and there's meat left on the bone, as I like.
This should be conserved. It really
should be conserved. There's no question about that in my mind.
A lot of potential here, but also a 1.0 is worth 6,600, guys.
I know. Well, just think what this book. You could. I think
that's expensive paper.
I think you can get.
It's a funny book
up to a 1.8 or a 2.
Yeah.
Conserved.
Oh, I think it could exceed a 2.
Well, I'm being very conservative on my estimate.
Correct the spine defect. Yeah, once you correct the spine defect, you're at 2 already.
Yeah,
and it presents beautifully.
The only unknown is that even if you were to cast the entire book, there's an unknown variable of how how much the paper could be strengthened and how they'll end up viewing it. So it's possible that even if you cast it, you get at best a slightly brittle notation, which is an improvement, and you have preserved the book more, but the cast is kind of holding the paper that is kind of slightly brittle together. Yeah,
that's a good point. What is the cap? What is the cap for brittle, and what is the cap for slightly brittle? Do you have them memorized, Phil? I should have looked them up.
Personally, I've had books. I'm trying to think. I've seen books around a 3. I want to say was slightly brittle. So, but it's a case-by-case basis too. It's one of those things. If it's like the whole book is perfect, except one part of it that's slightly brittle, it's a different case than a book that has a lot of defects too. I don't know exactly what the cap is. I would assume it's probably 4 if the book's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I should look that up. If anybody knows, let us know. Oh, Maurice says 3.0 max if paper is brittle. There you go. Oh, thanks, Maurice. Appreciate you. Also, shout out to Aaron Conyers who joined us. What's up? All right, so that's where we are for Universal. Now, this is 2021. 2021 was in the frenzy that was the comic book hot market of the pandemic, when I hate to say this because it's the catchphrase, but people had all that, stimulus money. I used to think that was actually just like certain people's political bent showing, but it turns out, like, statistically, people had excess savings, and it really was stimulus money.
For They're sitting at home with money and nothing to do.
And bored. And without able to spend it anywhere else. So this may be a bit of a peak in the price, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the wrap-up segment, or the conclusion title, I should say. Here's our book of the week that just sold. This is a conserved 1.0, and when you look at it here, you see what appears to be kind of white flecks everywhere. Yeah, that's because this book has been leaf cast, and that's actually the new cast that you're seeing everywhere.
I mean, well, my question on that is that
go ahead.
Holes, or is that cast that's just stuck to the outside of the cover?
Those are holes that were filled in.
Those are actually holes that were filled in. Because I had some of this effect before when I was doing casting, and it was just flecks that ended up floating and sticking to the cover. And I
don't think they would give it a conserved grade. I think they give it restored because they view the work quality as not being professional.
Not professional at that point.
Yeah, I could see the corners.
I'd love to know who did this work.
Probably County. I would take a stab at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could tell the back cover looks like it was completely detached and the spine was cast.
It does.
Yeah, right there.
It's probably an economical job where it was decided just to cast the cover and leave the interior for that very reason of the unknown. There's no guarantee in the bump and page quality. You're going to be having to add a lot more money into the book.
Because this is another brittle page book.
Yep.
Now, this one presents pretty well, but I would say the most unfortunate thing here is you had paper missing literally right on the Wonder Man's chin, and he is known as the Wonder Man, guys. And also in the main blurb there on the left. It detracts for me just from the presentation of the book. And in many ways, I feel like the other one presents just as well as this one, and does have more potential upside in that regard. But nevertheless, it still presents pretty darn well for a 1.0.
I wanted to talk about the brittle page thing, because that can
let's talk about it here. Let's talk about it here, actually.
Yeah, because I hate bringing up my Men's Adventures 25. That was a brittle page book. I mean, they labeled it brittle pages.
Right, because it was originally slabbed. You cracked it and resubbed it after the work you did.
Correct, and it was labeled as brittle pages, but I recovered it, and I got it to white to off-white.
Yeah.
From brittle.
Yeah.
So maybe I just got lucky on that, but you can bring back brittle pages.
You can reverse embrittlement with conservation.
Yeah, with conservation, because basically I deacidified everything and then used Japanese paper to put it all back together.
Larry, for that book too, it was for all intents and purposes, it was brittle, and it was brittle along the spine and split through every wrap, correct? That's why it was brittle. So
it was basically in two pieces. You had a left side and a right side. Every single wrap, including the cover.
Was that split? Wasn't it split after it was cracked, though?
Yeah, what had happened was it was graded by CGC. It was a 6.0.
6.0 brittle.
Yeah, it was a 6.0, but they labeled it with brittle pages, which I know what we're talking about here, but that's the way the label was. So the shop decided they thought there was room for improvement, so they cracked it. Yep. And when it cracked, everything just fell out just like leaves. Pieces, chunks, pages. There's nothing left. And the owner, who I know very well, he's considered an expert. He looked at it and says that's a 2.0 or less.
That's now a 2.0. It's now capped at 2.0. Yeah,
and so that's what I purchased it at.
And really, it should have been a less than 2.0 because every single wrap was cracked. If just the cover is split, it's capped at 2.0 already.
Yeah, he graded it as a 2.0, so it was probably 1.8 or less, but it did have brittle pages, but I was able to bring it back. So when I see brittle pages, I could maybe, I could do that.
Yeah,
I would take a wag at it, honestly.
Actually, so that the statement you just made brings to question what Maurice wrote here. If anybody, Maurice, Shelby, or anyone else in the chat, if you have handy your CGC Guide to Grading Comics by Matt Nelson, and if you can flip to that table and look and go across brittle pages and see where it caps out, and you can post it here for us, I'd appreciate it. I don't have my copy available here.
Actually, I got
in my mom's basement. Me, so. It's I don't have that.
If somebody wants to look that up, I got mine behind me. I can go.
Yeah, because you just told us you had a 6.0 with brittle pages.
Yeah.
But when was it graded?
It runs counter. I think in my video I still have the original label. I think I posted.
I remember. Yeah. All right, so I'll go over the grader's notes here. Again, we were just talking about it, but 1.0 brittle, conserved. Conservation includes leaf casting.
6.5. 6.5. Just to answer your question. So,
thank you.
Also, and this was just to clarify, because this was kind of my follow-up, Larry, and wanted to ask you about if the brittleness was just at the spine. They notate a difference in type of brittleness, which I think is accurate, right? So what you encountered was brittleness splitting.
Yes.
And that grade range is 0.5 to 6.5. And that we're going to assume is usually the spine splitting all the way, right? Yeah. So brittleness
is usually where brittleness is because there's more oxygenation,
oxidation
rather, on the spine.
In severe instances, there's brittleness chipping. So that's when you're going to get not just the splitting, but additional chipping.
Yeah,
so that's, in my mind, it's when I see brittleness, I'm almost like there should almost be slightly brittle, advanced brittleness. Because that way they could separate the difference between, is it just brittle and split, or is it brittle and then the edges are compromised, not just the spine? Then you're talking about a whole nother mess, because even casting something like that is difficult to keep everything together.
Maurice gave his best guess. He couldn't move because he had a cat in his lap. So we all understand, man.
Well, it's like Shelby.
I didn't know that there was a distinction in the guide. That's good on Matt for making that distinction. I think that's
that book is a treasure trove, man. I'm constantly going back to it and I'm learning new things. Detached cover. So despite the conservation, they left the cover detached.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done that.
Multiple wraps split from brittleness. So
that's why.
Interior wise, we had split cover. Yeah, wrap.
There's nothing to attach. Yeah, all the wraps were split, so there was nothing. The staple didn't have anything to hold on to. Probably is what it was.
Nathan, you are correct. Phil just confirmed for us. 6.5 is the cap for. Well, you say here slightly brittle. I don't know if there's a distinction.
So they went to the trouble to leaf cast the cover, but they didn't do anything.
Well, this is why Phil thinks this was a budgetary concern. constraint.
I agree.
Just to get it graded in a holder. Like the cover's holding the brittle interior from just going all over the place, basically.
Yeah, it's almost like a manila folder with a bunch of loose leaf in it.
Yeah.
Still presents pretty well, man. And okay, so this is
it's not gonna get
again
worse,
a well-loved book.
And so
over
rare,
80 years old, exceedingly rare, with some
85.
defects, including something that really bothers me, which is this leaf casting right on the Wonder Man's chin. And yet, somebody this week paid $3,840. That's before taxes and shipping, people. So if you live in a state like mine where the tax is nearly 10%, this baby's costing you over $4,000 in this state with still work to do. And you're probably thrilled to pay it, because where else are you going to get a copy of Wonder Comics #1 from 1939?
I think the person that bought it probably, maybe they saw meat on the bone on this one, because I do. I certainly do.
Absolutely. Go in there, fix the rest of the wraps, attach the whole thing with a staple the way it ought to be. And where are you at on this? At least a 3 in my book.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I
would. I mean, provenance is so. It's such an important part of the hobby anyway. I would say, because I've had.
This is the,
it's funny.
Speaking of provenance, this is the MP copy, Phil. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I see the.
It's
Oh,
the
I
MP.
see.
I was going to say, so I
MP
recently
put the
I've had
initials twice.
a couple books that have kind of made their rounds over the years, where whoever ends up getting it is reaching out and they're like, hey, so can anything be done? And they're usually the books where really nothing can be done. The risk is too high. That's why nothing has been done. And at least so in terms of provenance in this case, it certainly couldn't hurt to, if you were planning on bidding on it, reaching out to Kenny and saying, hey, Kenny, did you do the work on this? And then if it was him, it's like, perfect. What did the interior look like? Like, how delicate?
He can tell you, I could have done so much more, but the client only had this budget.
Exactly. Could have just been budget, or he could have been like, do not crack that book. You're thankful that you don't see pieces. Like, you don't know if it's that bad.
Pluck My Last Nerve says, Cat on My Lap sounds like a children's book. I was actually thinking it sounds more like an adult book, but that tells you where my mind is most of the time.
Keep on drinking.
I know for a fact my mom's not watching the episode tonight, so I can be racy, because she's just upstairs.
Is she going to come down and hit you with her shoe?
Or just a broom.
She's going to come down and saucer your ass.
Oh, man.
Love it.
All right, so here are the stats for those of you keeping track at home. Wonder Comics #1, CGC
right
1.0 fair market value. Now, I
More
caveated this. I put the years in here, guys, because
I
suspect the 2021 price was a little bit inflated. I think if that book came back to market today, it was probably closer to $5,000, and I think then this conserved book is a slightly higher percentage. That being said, 54% is respectable of the universal grade here. And again, I think this one also has a lot of meat left on the bone. So I really enjoyed doing the research on this one and just getting to deep dive into Wonder Comics #1. And this was fun for me.
I would have bid on that book if I could.
Yeah, what do you think? Would you?
Well, I agree with Phil. I would reach out to Kenny and say, "Did you work on this?"
We'd like to. Yeah, we'd love if anybody knows who worked on this. Please let us know.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I feel like the second book in particular was well bought, although maybe the 2021, the pandemic boom skews how well bought this one looks. Like if somebody sold a Universal 1.0 for $3,000 today, I might think that it's less well bought, but it's hard to say, right? With such a rare book, at the end of the day, you just have to say, I'm happy exchanging $3 or $5 or $6,000 for this, and it makes me happy, and move on, because it's impossible to price these things perfectly. These are not rational markets, and there's just too few of them coming to market. to ever really say. You know, it's sort of like, how do you price a one-of-a-kind item?
Well, the other thing is people look at them as, especially at this level, they're looking at them as commodities. They are things. These are investments.
It's an asset. It's an asset, and it's a full asset
little
class.
asset. They're not going to read it. They're buying it as an investment. They're going to flip it later on to somebody else who's going to do the same thing.
Yep.
That's
the coolest thing I think about this book too, and I forget sometimes until you were reading the notes, Paul, and I was like, oh yeah, you see the Bob Kane stories and art, and it's like, yeah, man, this book is literally on stands. May 1939. And what other book came out May 1939? I mean, Bob Kane had a couple other.
27, baby.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And like, I mean, this is such an important book. And also, it is, you can
for
tell.
Fox and, National, which, many people today know as DC at the same time, which was common for the really good creators were putting together material for all of the different comic book companies at the time.
But it's funny how there isn't a Bob Kane award, really. It's like the Eisner Award for a reason.
Could have
the
been
anatomy on the guy. It was so ahead of its time. The way that he was drawing that, it was crazy. Really
Eisner
crazy.
was another level, man. Yeah, there's a reason they're called the Eisners.
Same can't be said for our boy Bob Kane, which we love for Batman, but could not.
Oh yeah, he's a different kind of creator. I mean, love to all of them, but Eisner was on another level. Eisner did stuff that many creators today still can't do. Even looking at his stuff, and he pioneered it. So there's a good reason they're called
prowess.
The Eisner. Yeah. And creation. But my last bullet point here, I just like to ground myself because, I come from a working class background, and, I talk about some of the big books I've purchased on my channel from time to time, but man, $6,600 is that's a lot of money for a funny book in a 1.0, man.
That's big boy money.
It's not normal.
Yeah. There is always a market for these rare early golden age, especially superhero comics. And I do think, I don't know if there is an O'Brien effect in terms of, we know there's a Sodi effect, right? Other things being equal, if a book has been in Sodi, there's a premium on it. I don't know for sure that there's a premium on O'Brien books, but I think there is. I think there are enough people like me that saw that book 40 years ago plus, almost, coming up on 50 years ago, that are just have a special fondness for some of these books, even if CGC doesn't recognize it as a classic cover. For me, it's a classic cover. Yeah.
The quality in the books that are chosen for the book too speaks volumes about their desirability too. So it makes
Shelby says Will Eisner
books.
was. Sorry, I thought you were done. Sorry to interrupt, Phil.
Oh no.
Shelby says Will Eisner was a great guy, a good friend. I didn't know Shelby knew him personally. We have to get that story sometime. We're going to have Shelby on the show at some point, folks. Pluck My Last Nerve says Man Cave has a Captain America 1 7.5. Man, for me, Captain America 1 is kind of where it's at. In many ways, to me, that compares with Action 1 and Tech 1.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about punching a Nazi that just sort of trumps Action 1 and Tech 1. All right. So, any other comments on that, guys? Any comments from the audience on our fair market value segment? We're doing our little segue here into Larry's segment.
Yeah, I got a segment this week. I've been a little bit dry lately, and I haven't put out any video content on my channel. I've just been buried with this Batman book, and
you're killing it.
Yeah, I gotta get something out online. But yeah.
All right, let's jump right into it then.
Okay.
Just let me know when you want next slide.
Okay. So I picked this up as a purchase. I looked at it, and I as I said, there was meat on the bone. I was just looking for a Kraken press. So this particular book, this is originally Jack Kirby was at DC. This is one of his creations, and when he shifted over to Marvel, he brought with him the idea of a team, and that's when he created the Fantastic Four.
Right.
So I can't remember how many issues of this have run, but there's a lot. But this is a key, yeah, and I paid a bit for it, being a CBCS book, but I wanted it in a CGC slab, and I figured let's give it a crack in a press. If it's a break even, I'm okay with that, because I still think the CGC value is just a small percentage more than the CBCS,
especially for books of this era.
Yeah, and I looked at some of the things that were on it. There's chips and chunks missing out of the thing. There's a stain on the back cover, and so on. So
before we move on from this, I do want to talk about this book in context a little bit more, just the history here. So let's talk about how things were unfolding. 1956, the Golden Age has been dead almost a decade. You have the what we now recognize as the beginning of the Silver Age with Showcase 4 and the first appearance of Barry Allen, the Silver Age Flash. Right. It takes some while. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's a slow burn. But the Silver Age gets going over at DC. In 58, you had Adventure Comics 243, which for me is a huge key, and I know for you too, Larry.
Yeah.
And that's the first Silver Age superhero team, and that's the Legion of Superheroes, which I'm a huge fan of, and I want to see actually like in live action, or I want to see done properly someday. That's 58. This book is also 58, equally important. These both predate Justice League of America in Brave and the Bold number 28 by 2 years. And I think, don't get me wrong, Brave and the Bold 28, I'm a huge fan of that book. It's very important for the Silver Age. It's, arguably, I think most people recognize it as sort of the first Silver Age superhero team. It's clearly the precursor to the Avengers. But not for nothing, Challenge to the Unknown and Legion of Superheroes both predate it by 2 years. I think neither one of them gets their full due. So I think this is an extremely important book. I love the cover too.
Oh yeah,
it's so Kirby and it's quirky, and it's got great color.
I actually read it while I was working on it.
Yeah. Which is rare for us, folks.
Yeah,
we're usually too darn busy to read them.
I'm just like a machine. I just go, but I actually sat and read this while I was working on it. So it was an interesting book.
Great book. Again, and I keep saying this, but it's very genuine. You have a talent for picking great projects, Larry.
Oh, thank you.
This is another one. Yeah.
So these are the CBCS notes. So it came through, off-white to white. Spine wear, stress breaks, color, general cover wear, bends and soil increases. There is a tear. I ended up fixing that, but the 3/4 inch stain was not a water stain. It was something else that I could not. I tried to get it off, but I was going to ruin the book trying to get it out. So I kind of just go ahead and I went ahead and left it. But it had dust marks, and it still had some things to get clean. So I started working on it, inspecting it. When I first opened the thing up, it was frighteningly easy to get it out of the CBCS slab.
When was this one slabbed?
Something I never hear.
I don't know when it was slabbed, actually.
But CBCS actually, they're designed now to open destructively, clearly, but more easy. And it's actually almost like a mechanical fuse in that it's designed to break at a certain point.
Yeah, there's two tabs at the bottom. I popped them both off, and the bottom came off, and the thing slid right out.
I kind of think that's better than CGC's solution.
Yeah, CGC basically welds their books into the.
Yeah, they're sonically welded.
Yeah, they're sonically welded, and you know we clearly we know that there's flaws in that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started taking this book apart, and as I was going
Are we
through
ready
it,
for next slide?
yeah, go ahead. So as I was going through this, I got to the center wrap, and I found that the lower staple is detached. And I know CGC will bang you pretty hard on this, so I knew I was in trouble at that point. I was not going to maintain that 5.0. So I made the decision that, go ahead.
At the risk of disagreeing with you, Larry, I looked this up.
Did you?
And one staple detached in the centerfold, I forget it now, but it actually is greater than 6.
Okay.
Oh,
It's
much
like
higher.
it's 7, I think. Phil, do you happen to have it memorized?
I want to say I've seen an 8.5.
It might
That
be.
was
Really?
perfect
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
centerfold attached.
I think you can have a complete detached centerfold and still get a 6, actually, at CGC.
Yeah. See,
if I'm not
for
mistaken.
me, when I
I've seen a
opened
6.5 Golden
Yeah.
Age book though, maybe.
Yeah, when I opened this up, I went, ugh. And not knowing the information you just shared, I made the decision, okay, we're going to go ahead and fix this. And there was it was literally a hole. I mean, you go to the next slide, you can see it. It was sizable.
Bummer.
Yeah.
So
Larry, can I ask you something? Yeah. In my experience, and just passing this, like, so for anyone viewing too, you can corroborate this if you found this to be the case. I found these DC books have generally awful paper quality. There's something about them that you see splitting, popping staples more often than you do other books.
If you were to take a mic and measure the thickness of a DC book and compare it to a Marvel book of the same era, there's a significant difference in thickness.
Yep.
The paper quality.
Paper.
It's thinner paper, thinner covers. That I find that the DCs lose their cover ink real easy by comparison to a Marvel book.
I feel like I've seen a ton more like Superman and other books from this time period that are really nice, but you see some pop staples and you're like, how did that happen? And it's just because the paper's thinner, as you just said, and that just it's unforgiving if it gets a little tan.
Yeah, and if there's anything that, just the movement or just crushing.
What you found here on this book here,
yeah. So I went ahead and decided to go ahead and do the repair on that. So next slide. So this is the book I bought because there was really no data for a recent sale. I picked it up off of eBay. I was the high bidder at $294. It was much lower, but there was a sniper in there. And I want to say the book was under $100.
Oh,
and
wow.
I knew there was a lot of value in this book, and I went after it, and somebody else did, but I ended up getting it. But $294, so we'll just call it $300 for good numbers. There's no sales grades below. There was a 3.0. But it was in the distant past.
Now, Larry, do you ever look at when you're trying to figure out what you want to bid on a book, even if it's a CBCS, do you look at comparable CGC books?
Yes.
Did you look for this particular one?
Because I know ultimately I'm going to send it to CGC. Yep. I factor in the fact that the cost of the grading and the shipping and everything like that for a book, and especially a book of this era, it's going to be, this one I wouldn't put in the high value tier. I think I put it in the $400 tier. So just the vintage, but $32 plus express. So let's just call it $50.
Yeah, economy tier for those of you.
Yeah, let's just call it $50 for grading. And I want to make sure that the value that comes back based on sales data is such that I am going to create equity in the book.
Yeah, your goal is to create equity, even if you're discounting your labor to zero because it's your hobby.
Yeah, I think I put a max in for this book at like 310, so it was right
so
there.
You just got there, yeah.
Yeah, I just got there because now I'm getting into like a break even situation.
What was the comp at CGC for a 5.0?
There wasn't anything recent.
There wasn't anything there either. Okay.
Yeah. So
fair enough.
If you go to the next slide, you'll see it.
Before we move on here, I'm just going to mention Nathan. Thank you. Nathan Deal says fully detached centerfold is 7.0 and higher, and if higher under qualified, I think is what he means here.
Okay.
Qualified label would be potentially even higher, of course.
Larry, that was also taking into account you going into this anticipating just a clean and press and reset, right?
Yeah, bring that up because that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah,
because it's going to be a very simple
the data
thing
that I asked for.
I was just going to dry clean it, press it, and pop it out the door. So this is a CGC. This is based. We're talking 6 years ago. So for the last sale, it was
2018.
Yeah. So,
but interestingly, the peak at 750.
There's always an outlier.
Yeah.
So
cool. Okay.
But you look at that. So this is the book.
There's your. This is the after, folks.
This is the after. So it was all fixed up. It was conserved. It presents well. Once it was all back together and we got it back. But
it's beautiful.
Yeah,
it presents beautifully.
Yeah, I was happy. It came back off white to white on the pages, and I thought it presented well with the repairs and everything done.
So it's really just that stain on the back left that held it down. Otherwise, it looks like about a 7.
Yeah. It presents really well. Yeah, but that stain, I who knows?
Yeah.
Mystery stain. So. If you go through, go ahead and flip it back. I think we'll get the notes on there.
By back, you mean forward?
Oh, it's flip forward. I'm sorry. Oh, no, comps. So CGC Universal. So, again, no real recent comps. Last sale was 2022.
I would argue 2022, the market's been pretty stable since 2022. That's a reasonable comp.
Yeah, because we're at the end of getting towards the end of the COVID.
In 2022, the market was already starting. Well, I guess
not for everything.
This is June.
But
but this is June of 2022.
Stuff like this, I think, was generally
market was already cooling,
stabilizing.
Yeah. So this is a heritage. So it's a live wild auction. Like Heritage tends to run, and basically looking at it. So that was my comp in a sense for that. But 2022, we're talking 2 years ago now. So adjusting for inflation, things like that, I came up with a round number of probably right around $700 for a Universal at 5.5. So just for easy math. So if you go to the next slide, it'll show you the overall grades. So the last recent sale was in April. It was a 7.0, and it was a little over $1,000.
That's more than $100 a point, and so is the 6.0.
Yeah, so is the 6.0. So if you go through, I think adjusting for the 2 years have gone by, calling it $700 for the thing was fair, and then using our kind of formula for a conserved grade anywhere from 50% to 75%. So. I don't know. It was either a break even, I made $50, or I created $225, or someplace in the middle of this
minus your grading fee. So
somewhere
between break even and $175 equity created after your grading fee, and it's a beautiful book, and you preserved it, and created a little bit of equity, put it in your personal collection.
Yeah, again, I put in notes for CGC. And I don't know if the notes do anything. We had that discussion last week, but
hey, I sense someone coming over to the dark side.
Yeah. Anyway, I got the book right here.
Yes,
So-
let the hate flow through. No,
Oh, that's awesome.
There it is.
awesome.
I love that.
Yes,
Phil.
Phil, let the hate flow through.
Oh man.
So
Do it. All right, sorry. All right.
Strike me down.
But-
Great book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
show
some
us.
book, Larry. Great
Show
job.
us. Show us again.
oh, you want
Yeah, let's see it.
Okay. Trying to
It's
get
awesome.
any reflections here.
Great book.
Come on, camera focus. There we go.
Yeah.
That's kind of.
Still phenomenal.
Yeah.
You can see if you want to broaden your scope, you can see that's an early Watcher prototype with that little green guy on the right.
Right? That looks like Owatu all day long.
Yeah.
Well, the water
Oh,
stain, see
here.
if I can capture
Let
this.
me
There it
give you-
is.
yeah, let me give you
Or
this
whatever
thing.
that stain is.
Ugh.
If I can get this camera to.
Buy the book, not the grade. It looks nicer than a 5.5 all day long.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's the best I could do with that stain.
Yeah.
So,
I would be
Okay.
thrilled to have this in my collection.
Yeah.
Good on you.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I have to tell you guys that, I have my personal collection, my PC books, but I just shipped off, I shared with you guys, or, privately,
Yeah.
that I shipped off 36 books to Heritage.
I'm going to be
And-
shill bidding on them.
They will be, they will be on the July 23rd auction
Nice.
for their Saturday,
We'll,
Sunday.
we'll give people a reminder when we get closer. You know what? Actually, Larry, let me know. We'll put a link in the show notes for.
Oh,
for
that'd be a
people.
great idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in the
because that way we can
description.
just
Okay.
kind of watch, because there's a bunch of conserved books.
Technically, yes. Pragmatically and ethically,
Let's
no.
read the question.
Absolutely not.
Let's read the question, Phil, before we answer it.
Yeah,
All right.
question.
If the stain holds the book down to a 5.5, since it's already conserved, if you cracked it and the stain is cut out and leaf cast, you could get a grade bump. And the answer is technically yes.
Isn't it
yeah,
more
But
like a
we
maybe?
wouldn't do that. Yeah.
Isn't it more like a maybe?
I
They don't treat leaf casting as if original no defect.
Yeah, I would have.
I don't know
problem-
exactly what the calculus is, but it's better than if you have 2 pages, you leaf cast them together. The grade is better than 2 separate pages, but it's not as good as never ripped ever.
I would have trouble cutting that corner
Yeah.
out and casting it. That's like cutting off.
That's a subjective answer. It's tough to. I mean,
it's cutting off a
I've
finger
seen
and drawing
books-
a new one.
I've seen books that came back about a 3.5 that had casted covers that had a lot of art missing, like a lot of art, and it just got deducted for art loss, not paper loss, because the paper was casted. But to
Right.
me, that kind of set a bar where I was like, oh wow! So if you have a book with a split spine and a lot of paper missing, as long as the paper isn't even if the paper's on the front cover, you can still get a 3.5 for a lot of color loss. So
Yeah.
it always depends on the book and where
Totally
the paper's
can.
missing. But I would argue in that case, if the paper was on the back cover and you had all art on the front, that 3.5 could have been a 5.5.
Yeah.
So
And to be fair, I don't think Maurice is advocating for this. This is more
no,
of
he's just wondering.
for the sake of science type question, right?
Exactly,
Yeah,
it's
to be fair.
understandable. Yeah. Then Ben says this.
Yeah.
I find your lack of faith disturbing. I got
Ryan
one.
LCS is checking in.
Yeah,
Shout
one
out
thing
to
I want to
Ryan
mention,
LCS.
I don't see Peter in our audience tonight, but
No, there was
Peter
probably a
was-
witch trial in Salem.
he probably
We got caught up in.
But Peter, he
He's probably
brought
dunking witches right now.
he brought in our rust cleaner idea
Absolutely.
for removing the paper. What a great idea!
Yeah.
Cautions. I went to go clean my Batman staples, and I put them in there, and I put
Yeah, put them in there. Be
and
clear with
I came back
everybody. You
in,
put them
the
in.
morning, and they were no longer
Love-
there.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Wow.
Both those staples, so I have to replace the staples. So I do have spares, but I am going to get dinged for probably a staple replacement on the Batman book. So word of
Oh,
caution.
you're not really dinged. It'll just be noted because it's conserved book.
Yeah, it will be dinged, but it'll be noted. And, I've got another book that came back that way too. But just a word of caution.
Let's actually be a little bit more. Let's give more data here, Larry. You put them in specifically.
Specifically, I had a little beaker with 100 milliliters. I dropped 2 staples in it.
100 milliliters of what?
At 9 o'clock. And the next morning at 6 a.m., I got up and there was nothing in the little beaker.
Well, there was. It was just in solution. The iron was still there. The mass is conserved. It's just in solution now.
They were just surface rust. There was still shiny staples.
So we're talking about specifically, though, for the listeners, evaporust, yes?
Evaporust, yes, we are talking about evaporust.
So the liquid or the gel?
It ate everything.
Yeah. As Larry said, the Chevy corroborates. So a short duration only. No long durations, or your staples will be no more.
Your staples will be solubilized. That's what they'll be.
You'll have done a magic trick. You'll have made them disappear. But it's a good magic trick.
Yeah, it's going
bad magic trick.
Oh, crap. Yeah. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah, it's going to end up with there's no 1940 staples laying around, so it's going to end up with 1950 staples in it, but it'll still be somewhat vintage.
Yeah. All right. Wow.
Hey, that was a good,
great outcome with that.
So, what are you working on right now, Phil? That you can share with the audience?
If you want to see, he might even be watching. I mean, amongst other books, I have a really short copy of Amazing Fantasy 15.
Feels like funny you should ask.
Funny.
And this old thing? What, this old thing? My goodness.
This nice copy of the next issue.
Treasures that are just laying on Phil's
appearance.
workbench. Holy moly.
This is one that really, the before and after that I post, it's going to be remarkable. It really, like, the eye appeal increase is more
How do you
than
guys feel about ASM 1?
I think I like ASM 1 more than AF 15. Yeah, the thing is the rarities of these things. We talked about that. All you need is a credit card. Well, a big limit credit card, but really you can go out and buy one.
In terms of they're available, right? At any given moment, there's a dozen AF-15s
it's not like
for sale.
Where there's like 10,000 of them out there floating around.
Sure.
But yeah, you can go find an AF-15 or a AS-1 out there. Just how much do you want to spend?
Sure. But why do you like ASM 1 over AF-15?
I just like to look at the cover.
I'm gonna take the other side of this argument.
Okay.
I actually have zero interest in owning an ASM 1, and I would actually love to have an AF-15 in my collection.
Well,
I feel similarly to like Tales of Suspense 39 versus Iron Man 1. That's how low I put ASM 1 on my hierarchy.
I can see why you do that. You know what?
I know that and I'm not saying that I'm right.
I get why.
I'm just throwing out there. I know there are people that are just crazy about that ASM run, and they would. I know people for whom ASM 1 is a literal grail. It just doesn't do it for me. What are we interested about? For me, what are we interested about?
I think I can tell you one thing that'll make you change your mind, and that is Amazing Spider-Man 1 is to the Silver Age what Superman 1 is to the Golden Age. That's why
I'm also not interested in Superman 1. It's a reprint book.
Well, then I'm never going to change your mind. But that's the only reason why it's important. Because also it's the second appearance of Spider-Man. It's just as important. But I get your argument, though. I get it.
It doesn't. I just have no interest in it. I have more interest in Batman 1 by a far shake. At least it's original material.
What's going on the cover? He's in the tube and he's like, they underestimate me. I'll get it. But you're also like, it looks like you get a scoop out of the top. I mean,
guys, it's a Kirby cover versus.
Okay. First of all, you're a DC guy. You are a hardcore DC.
No, that's not true. Only for the Golden Age. No. Please, I'm going to establish my bona fides right now.
Okay.
I was all in on Cochrane. I was all in on Claremont and Byrne. Like my first thing, I'm a huge X-Men head. I was all in on Marvel. In the 80s, I bought the only DC title I purchased regularly was New Teen Titans, which I would argue was really done in the Marvel mold. It's just that my golden age proclivities are toward the DC books. But in the silver and gold age, I'm all over Marvel. I'm a huge fan of the Marvel age generally. I'm very... Like I own Brave and the Bold 28 and Justice League 1, but I do not have a full run of Justice League. I own a full run of Avengers.
See, I've been dabbling into the DC stuff. And actually, I blame you. Because
I'm glad I'm broadening your horizons.
Yeah, you do. So I've been strictly a Marvel guy for really my whole life. I have very few, DC stuff. While we're sitting here talking, I bought a gorgeous Brave and the Bold 58 with the Green Lantern cover on it, and it's the guy advertises is a 9.6, and it looks pretty good. So we'll see. It's that Coast to Coast Comics, the guy that had the it's like a barn find. I should have some stuff showing up tomorrow. It turns out, I'm in Folsom, California. This guy's in Rockland. It's the next town over.
Ooh.
So I contacted the guy. I said, hey, I know you're doing free shipping, so this cost you. I can just drive up and meet you. Boy, absolutely no. He said, I will stick your books in the mail. Don't worry. I said, okay. All right. He has his reasons.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. A lot of people don't like to meet, and so
face-to-face is not everybody where everybody wants to be.
Yeah, I got some. I got one of the really expensive books is coming tomorrow, so I'll share it with you guys later. But we'll see.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I want to do a couple comments on the comments here. So, Mike, my buddy, Mike Hugo Danner here, he submitted letters to the editors of comic books. He reached out to creators, and he was during a time when the creators, before we had social media and everything, when the creators would personally write you a note, and made so many connections. And says Dave Cockman was a really nice guy. Got to know him once, knew him a little, which is great. Actually, who was it? Somebody said, show us a close-up, Phil. So I'm going to put you back on Phil here so that you can show off those books again. Can you show
this is a moment where I will admit my jadedness, where I'm like, it's what I do. To me,
treasures laying literally on the workbench.
$1 worth of books in his room right now. So
here's one of the AF-15s. I mean, look at this. This is another one that is just going to be so... One of my favorite things to do on this book is when I start cleaning it. When you start cleaning the white stripes, a lot of people realize when they look and they see the before and after, they're like, I never noticed that as it's like his movement. It's subtle, but that's... And you don't even notice them sometimes in some copies because the colors are so dull.
The colors are so...
And doing some of the before and after, showing some of the white stripes clean and some of them not clean, you're like, wow,
is this the only Peter Parker Kirby cover? Think about it.
I believe so. Yeah.
He doesn't do a cover for ASM, certainly not in the first 50 issues, maybe ever.
The other one's very delicate, so I'm going to leave it. But since I have you here, I can take one book that I can show that is a cool book. And that is...
We'd love to see it.
It's a real curious one and complicated. I have to reach out to the client and tell them the assessment's done and what I think. But this is it's not a Silver Age book; it's a Golden Age. I think I might have shown it before. This is one I'm keeping the
Batman,
for
Phil.
Now. That's holy Batman.
Ooh.
Yeah, this is.
So where do you rate, Phil? I know we've talked about this before. Where do you rate Tech 27, 29, and 31 in terms of, we know the importance of 27 with the first appearance, but if we take that away, where do you rate those three covers? How do you rate them?
I would put...
And maybe hold that up for people to savor while you answer.
Yeah. I want that so badly.
You know what's cool? Just a fun fact. There's technically two different variations of this book. where the cowl here is gray or more blue.
Blue, yeah.
Those are the two different, and like, so people that buy
Color
copies of this book will be very just, I'm not going to do it because that's one of the, But the rest of us, any copies.
So walk us
Shelby
through
had
the
a
first
nerdgasm.
3 cover appearances of Batman and how you rank them.
Yeah.
Because you're a big Batman.
Yeah, so 27, 29, and 31. Yeah, I mean, in my honesty, I think 33 is the best.
Okay, you're gonna dodge the question entirely. That's fair. That's awesome.
Because of the origin, and it's such a ass cover too. Like I get the allure for 31, but honestly, in terms of importance and everything, I put this above.
Okay.
The rest.
Well, that's a great answer.
He was the first hero to be given like a detailed origin about why he was doing what he was doing. He wasn't just like killing. Yeah. So I
this is why you're here, folks.
Yep.
This is why you're here. For me, it's that cover right there, 31.
Yeah.
The 29.
I get it. Yeah, I get
it.
If
I were to ever get into big boy books, actually, I like the one that 31.
I would put this. So I would do 27, then I would do 31, and then I would do 33. If I'm being like reasonable, like that's what I would do. Yeah. So, but I would put this above 29.
Just the misty type clouds, the moon coming through them.
It's iconic.
You had me at the moon.
One more time. Hey.
That's so cool.
Oh my
One thing I'll say about this too, and this is one of the craziest things. So in this copy, I found out after looking at it and doing the inspection, one of the craziest things, and that is whoever did the prior restoration on this copy. I don't know if I can show this here. The whole spine, if you look at where the line is, they actually redrew it over some of the art. Sure. So about 1/8 of an inch of the entire art was covered by white acrylic that matches the back cover, because I think there was old tape that someone removed. So I put this on my light box once I knew what I was looking at, and you can see the old black, the original black line that's underneath part of the acrylic. You can see some of the art that's underneath the white line of the acrylic here, and I was like, I've never come across something like that before.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, since we're delving into this a little bit, you have Tech 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. So we're talking about the 6th appearance of Batman, but only his 3rd cover appearance. And for many of us, the best Batman cover ever. Well before Robin shows up and sort of just ruins Batman.
makes it more
campy. Really feel about Robin.
Pluck My Last Nerve says, I have 227.
This is just a quick question.
Yeah, I was going to bring this question up. I'm glad you pulled it up because this is kind of important.
I have another I'd like to highlight.
Probably the best answer for this.
I'll say, okay, yeah. So the main answer is so what's the difference between A1 purple and conserved? So conserved by definition has to be A level quality, and there really is kind of a, it's supposed to be within a 1 level, but as we've talked about on this channel, just to clarify, I think leaf casting and the amount of tear seals and spine split seals, it really is an infinite number. Like you can basically do it. There's no cap on how much, as long as it's done professional. But in this case, a difference would be, let's say you have a book with color touch. You can't do that in a conserved book, so that would be A1 as long as it's a small amount of color touch. It was done professionally, and all the rest of the work basically would qualify for a conserved label. There would be, if you guys want to detail, I'll just start with that one if you guys want to.
Tiny bit of piece fill. Actually, there's a whole bunch of things that could be the difference between these two grades.
I've got a couple of these. I've got a few A1s that they came back as they're purple. So one of them I sent back for reevaluation, because I did everything in accordance to CGC's conservation rules, and I looked at it. It wasn't extensive. I used rice paper and wheat paste, and it came back as an
By
A1.
rice paper, you mean Japanese paper.
Japanese paper. Mm-hmm. So it's not rice paper, people. Sorry, I said that. Japanese.
No, it's okay.
Paper. But
I'm here to interpret.
I know you are. I have two of them. One was arguable because it did have a lot of tear seals and things like that in it, so questionable. The other one I sent back, and in fact, they have it now, so I'll be curious what it comes back at. But I asked them to reevaluate it as conserved rather than restored. But Zach has a very good point. It's where is that gray area? Where does it make the transition from the conserved label A1 to a purple label A1? And I don't know. Because what I thought was going to come back conserved came back purple.
And truthfully, CGC sometimes puts them in either bin.
Yeah, I'm hoping
and also shout out, Zach. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, that's Zach. That's a really good question.
That said, though, again, there's going to be things that are definitely every time. Like if there's color touch, if there's certain cleanings, you're always going to get the restored label over a conserved. So those are constants. But then there's the
there's certain things that'll absolutely trigger it. There's other things that probably shouldn't. Let's talk about this again. Phil, do you use that book binding press? So people,
all the presses in the back I use. Yeah.
This is a copy press. It's not actually a book binding press. Yeah. A book binding press looks different. It would have 4 legs on the sides, and it would have a different maximum opening. If you look at that where the wheel is, he can only open that about maybe 2 inches or so. The total mouth on it, maybe 2.5.
It's a little bit more than It's not very much. It's enough to put several pages.
This is not a book. This isn't even a nipping press. This is a copy press. Now it probably could be used for those purposes, though probably not quite as well as a true nipping press. That said, what do you use it for, Phil?
Yeah.
I use it for
paperweight.
I mean, it just depends. I have multiple uses for it. I mean, primarily I'm using it to help take spirals out of books. But I'll also use it. Yeah, but I'll also use it to flatten and dry casted pages. But that's only momentary while I'm not doing a whole lot of it.
Can you fit a whole wrap in it flat, or is it too small? Because that's what I'm running into.
So I have you basically I make like a sandwich where I have some thicker boards that I put the whole wrap in, and then there's enough pressure to put.
You can produce tremendous pressure.
Oh yeah,
these.
Yeah.
They have their place for sure in conservation.
I want a big one. The one
and
you
can find them.
Yeah, I've been looking and I cannot find one because I want one that I can put a complete wrap down flat and press it.
Yeah.
The
thing is, you're going to have to drop $600 or $700 from what I've seen. Yeah. But you can find ones with appropriate size platens.
Yeah. Well, I looked at actually buying the parts and building one. Honestly.
There are folks that sell modern ones. You can buy a modern one with the appropriate
because it's got the 4 clamps on each, one on each corner, and you just grind the thing down.
I'm just such a sucker for like vintage stuff that I'm actually, I'm looking for one of these close to me in the Houston or Austin.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have seen. I almost actually posted a pic here of some of the other. I have lots of interest, folks, other than comic books. Like vintage watches and other things like that, and more, and sillier things yet. But for me personally, it would have to be a nice vintage. But I would be fine with a copy press like this with 2 arms. I think for our work, that's enough pressure.
Yeah, you don't need to crush it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not poo-pooing it so much as I'm just trying to correct the verbiage around it. So I will continue to do that. It's not personal anybody. But that's a copy press.
There's a lot
not
of different
binding
types
press
of presses.
and not a nipping press.
Yeah. If you look at, like, there's some videos on YouTube of like huge conservation labs and archives doing leaf casting, and you'll see they have something that's about the size of my table here. It's a huge, with a huge ring that they're turning, and they can be doing, I don't know how many sheets.
Yeah, and taller
That's
than
an unbelievable amount of sheets and a huge space too in which to press.
A true bookbinding press
varieties.
exerts actually more pressure yet even than that, and it's more uniform, and it has a bigger throat when it's open, so that you can level the pages and do a bunch of other stuff with it, which you wouldn't be able to effectively do with that particular press. Yeah. Again, I'm probably being way too pedantic here. Just for fun, Phil, Ben Stewart asked, do you ever wake up in the morning dreading going to work like the rest of us saps?
I mentioned this to someone the other day. Think like it's funny. Yeah, everyone, you go to your job and you're supposed to like your job, and I love what I do, but on a technical level, sometimes if you look at what I'm doing exactly, it's like on this AF-15, the amount of time I spent dry cleaning the inside covers and the back covers specifically, and I wasn't even looking at the front cover with Spider-Man. It was every other piece of the cover, and I'm tediously going through with an eraser and cleaning this book like it's a surgery. Yeah. And there's nothing glorious about this work at all. It's you just have to have a lot of patience, and I look forward to seeing the before and after. But if you look at the work on a technical specific level, you're like, man, you got to really like comics. You're going to get bored with this real quick. And I like live and breathe this stuff. So it's more about being in the right mindset to be like, all right, I'm going to be dry cleaning this book. That's $20,000.
Well, Larry touched on it earlier too. Yeah. We often don't even read the books we're working on. So
sadly, it's true.
Yeah. I try to. Well, I actually try to read a comic book every day, even if it's not one I happen to be working on. So that's just a goal of mine. But Zach says, I see some collectors who refer to A1 as professional restoration, which sounds kind of good, but I guess the bottom line is it doesn't quite follow every rule needed to get it conserved. Right. There's a bunch of things that we went over. Actually, go back and watch. Was it last episode or the episode before,
I think it's
guys?
Before.
Episode 13, Zach. Go back and watch episode 13. We did a deep dive into the definition of conserved and some of the rules that will trigger you into either restored or qualified, and some of the other little nuances that could get you in one or the other. Go back. We did a deep dive in that episode.
Two of the most common types of restoration you see too are color, touch, and trimming. Almost,
those are just trigger. No matter what else was done, that's just restoration. Pluck My Last Word says, I found that dry cleaning is relaxing for me. It can be therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
I'm often just lose myself in the work, and
I need to see the results, from beginning to end. It's like when I get off a trip, that's how I depressurize. It's like clean comic books.
Yeah.
So. It's just like, of course, this Batman 13, I was very excited to get started on it, but it got so drawn out. 16 wraps. That's a lot of wraps, man.
Not that it's stressful to hold the lives of hundreds of people in your hands daily when you're at work or anything, huh, Captain?
No, I'm usually flying boxes.
You don't have to come home and decompress at all.
Yeah. If I have to fly passengers, then I have to decompress after that. It's not the passengers are great. I hope there's no flight.
Don't say it. Do not say it. Just don't go there.
It's the flight attendants.
Okay, he said it.
I said it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Pluck My Last Word said, I found that dry cleaning is relaxing for me. And I comment often on my channel when I do show dry cleaning work. I say, place your feet flat on the ground. Breathe. Make sure you have good ergonomics. Relax and do this stuff, because if not, you can find yourself like holding your breath and like starting to sort of cut corners and such, and that's when you're going to make a mistake. I actually think for conservation, the number one skill to be a good comic book conservationist is actually just patience. More than anything else. You need other skills too.
100%.
But the most important skill is actually just patience. I don't think we have anything else to present in terms of material. I don't see any other significant questions here that I necessarily want to comment on. But I always like to end on a high note. Spidey Sense, thank you for joining us again. And he says, kudos to your hard work and dedication, Phil. Best in the game by far.
Yep.
Phil, when I met him, I was immediately impressed. Actually, even before I met him, but when I met him in person, I was immediately impressed with his dedication to the craft. And I'm happy to call him friends and happy to have him as a co-host here. So
I'm not
as well
the best
as
in the game,
obviously,
but I will appreciate the kind words. As I say, when people like, I'm always grateful to hear nice words. I think that you can either do the work proficiently and professionally, or you can't. And like Paul said, the biggest thing is patience. And I'm a human, and other people that do this work are humans too. And we're not perfect, and we just try our best to be as patient and as good as we can, as often as we can. And so,
thank you. Yeah.
And to answer Shelby's question, yes, we have our tickets to the Collector's Summit.
Oh yeah, I was going to bring that up. Collector's Summit, people, we're all in. If you're on the outside looking in, it's not too late. They're not sold out yet. Go get a ticket. We want to see you there. They don't sponsor the show or anything, but we're going to have a blast. It was a blast last year, and we're looking forward to seeing everybody there.
Looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
High-end vintage comic books.
All right, y'all. I really enjoyed the show. I really appreciate everyone joining us. Please, if you enjoyed the show, give us a thumbs up. Throw a comment in the YouTube there, and tell a friend about the show. We appreciate it. It helps us get the word out. As always, thank you all for joining us, whether you're watching us live or watching us later during the week at YouTube. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate you guys.
And everyone.
Until next time,
we'll see you next weekend.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.